At this point, we've created a release track, and we've added 2 releases to that track, and that included mapping a phase in each release to each milestone and production stage in the track. Now let's talk about some of the things that you can do to manage these releases through the track. We talked about the approval process for production phases, but what if we want to gate the code freeze with an approval as well? So we can edit the track, scroll to the code freeze milestone, select Require Approval for the code freeze, and click Save. And now we can see that there's an approval icon for each phase under the code freeze milestone. Let's go back to the release and see what this looks like there. By the way, I can select a phase on the left and then click Actions and select Go to Release to get back to the release for that phase. There is one caveat to that though. I mentioned earlier that we can have releases from different projects in the same track. So if the release is from a project that's different from the project we're currently logged into, this option won't work. We have to navigate to the project for that release first. Now notice that there's a new change in the staging phase, which is the phase that's tied to code freeze. The phase is still set as manual, but notice that the Run button is disabled. The running of this phase is now controlled by the track, and it can't be run until the code freeze milestone is approved by the track owner. If we go back to the track, we can click the approval icon and then go to Actions and select Approve. And let's see what this does in the release. And we can see that the Run button for the staging phase is enabled again. Now, if something happens and we need to take back this approval, we can do that easily as well. Again, we click the icon, we go to Actions, and select Withdraw Approval. And the last thing we'll look at is that we can also use the release track to manage priorities and dependencies between the phases that are assigned to a production stage. Notice that under DC East on the left, I have 2 phases listed, and they're at the same level. And that means that if all the releases are approved, when we hit the production time frame, these 2 phases execute in parallel. But we can change the order in which they run by setting up a dependency. To do that, I click Set Dependencies. Now notice that the phases aren't listed here, just the releases. And that's because the dependencies are set at the release level and then ripple down to each phase. So I can drag the AR reports release up so that the billing release falls underneath it. And what that means is that once we hit the production timeline, the AR reports release will start first. And the billing release only starts once the AR reports phase is complete. So let's close that. And if we look at the panel on the left, we can see that billing is now showing underneath the AR reports release and can actually be expanded and collapsed. But also notice that this dependency isn't just for one phase. It's been created for all the phases in both releases. And we can see that this dependency is also reflected in the timeline on the right. And we can clearly see these indicators of a dependency for both production stages. It is worth pointing out, though, that we don't see these dependencies in the non-production phases. Creating a dependency only affects the deployment order for the production phases. So if we have multiple releases that are going to be deployed at the same time to the same domain, this dependency feature is useful in several ways. First, it reduces the load on the domain. Also, if there's some code dependency that requires one release to be in place before another is deployed, this ensures the applications are deployed in the right order. But it might also be the case that a deployment requires a restart. And if we schedule all of the deployments for the same time, either in parallel or sequentially, we can then do one restart at the end. In a large deployment, this simple feature can save a lot of time for the production deployment by eliminating multiple restarts. So that's a quick introduction to release tracks, how they work in CDD, and the benefits they offer for managing multiple release deployments effectively.